Thanks so much for being with us here on Atlanta News First Plus. I'm Joy Lim Nakrin. Okay, I just want to let you know we continue to follow the latest out of Emory University now. At least 15 people have been arrested at this campus after demonstrations that are primarily focused on the Israel-Hamas war, but also the protesters have raised concerns about the Atlanta Public Safety Training Center, that construction that is, of course, ongoing. So these protests began this morning. It's multiple groups gathered to protest the Israel-Hamas war, but again, also what these protesters are calling Cop City. But we've seen protests really around the nation regarding the Israel-Hamas war at various college campuses. But Atlanta News First Crew saw at least 15 people detained as these protesters ended up clashing with police and the Georgia State Patrol as well. According to organizers, protesters were demanding. We're demanding, quote, total divestment from Israel, apartheid, and defend the forest is one of the groups involved, who posted on X, formerly known as Twitter, that the protesters at Emory University are part of the Gaza Solidarity and Stop Cop City encampment. Those arrested appear to be students, some non-students, and also professors. Some protesters are actually seen holding signs that say Stop Cop City, while other areas show items laid out on the lawn that resemble bodies in reference to the ongoing war. And in a statement, Emory University said several dozen protesters trespassed onto the private school's campus early this morning and set up tents in the quad there. The school's police department told the group to leave, and Atlanta Police and State Patrol were called for help as well. Let me show you some images from the scene here. And the statement goes on to say these individuals are not members of our community. They are activists attempting to disrupt our university as our students finish classes and prepare for finals. It goes on to say Emory does not tolerate vandalism or other criminal activity on campus. And among those arrested was Noel McAfee, the chair of the university's philosophy department. Atlanta News First has reached out to Emory for comment on her arrest, but has not heard back at this time. And one Emory PhD student said the arrests make him feel sad, not just for the university, but for the state of the country. Gerald Griggs from the Georgia NAACP, the president there, posted on X that, quote, given the events that occurred this morning on campus, he's requesting a meeting with Emory President Gregory Fenves to discuss the events on campus as soon as possible. And again, Emory joining now several other universities whose campuses have become the site of some pretty heated demonstrations and protests surrounding Israel and Gaza. The movement has swept the nation after more than 100 people were arrested at Columbia University in New York last Thursday, a week ago. And in Georgia, Kennesaw State University students held a rally and a walkout Thursday morning on campus in support of the Palestinian people, in the territory of Gaza. And some people are saying, in support of Palestine. And Palestine is not actually an official, state or place even, but many believe that it should be. Students who were protesting at Georgia Tech also gathered Wednesday night to call on their school to do more for the Palestinians. The protests came days after Morehouse College students, faculty, and alumni voiced their concerns about President Joe Biden speaking at the school's graduation commencement next month, arguing that he has not done enough to end the war. I want to see now if I can actually get some of the images I'm seeing on X, if I can get them up for us to touch on. Let's see. But in the meantime, Sorry, we're just working to get some of those images from X, and if I can show them to you. Thanks, Maria. Maria Moreau, many of you probably know, working on, thank you, our digital team. So this is our website, and I just want to point you to our website because we have all the latest information on this here and some really compelling images on atlantanewsfirst.com, and also our free mobile news app if you want to see. But I've shown you some of the videos which you can see here, but what I wanted to show you was on X. This is from our Patrick Quinn.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do for you right now?
Patrick writes on X. Among those arrested today were
Philosophy Department?
Chair of the Philosophy Department at Emory University.
I will.
I've asked for a comment from Emory on this arrest. No word yet.
I got you.
This video was provided to us by an
Emory
PhD student. You can hear him in this video. Encourage you to check that out on atlantanewsfirst.com. You can download our free mobile news app. I want to bring in at this time a special guest that I have joining us. Apologize, I'm just having a little technical difficulty with Splash Top. All right, I apologize, a little bit of technical difficulty there. I want to bring in a special guest that we have with us. We have attorney Erica Wilson. Thank you so much for being with us, Erica. Talking about, let me play this video of what we've been seeing today. Talking about what's happening or what has happened at Emory. Obviously, people do have the right to peacefully protest in the United States, but here officials are saying that many of the protesters were not members of the community. They were not students or professors, and they were trespassers. And furthermore,
only one solution.
The university said that there was vandalism that happened here. So what's your response?
So Joy, you're absolutely right. So we do have a right to protest peacefully, but we cannot break laws, we cannot violate rules and regulations. And so if you do have people who are on the campus who are not, there rightfully, then they would be violating, protest laws. But here's the thing, you certainly cannot engage in any sort of vandalism, because here's the key word in this is peaceful protest. It does not become peaceful any longer once you start with destruction of property and vandalizing others' belongings. And so that definitely cannot occur. So Emory would be well within its right to have anybody who is violating those rules and laws arrested, immediately. But again, these type of things definitely are not, wanted on these type of campuses, particularly Emory. Emory is a beautiful campus, but the students there do have a right to protest. And as far as the other people being on there, typically they do have an open campus policy. What Emory cannot do is start implementing new rules to violate people's rights to protest. You have a constitutional right, you have a First Amendment right to free speech, and so you therefore have a right to be there, and they cannot start implementing these arbitrary rules simply because they don't like the content of the protest.
Interesting. So you're saying that the public has a right to be at Emory University even if they're not students?
Yeah, they have an open campus policy. Now, I'm not sure in what areas they're on. Certainly, they cannot be in the housing areas. Those type of things are restricted. But as far as people being on the campus, they do have a visitors policy there. And so typically, if you're not violating any of these visitors policies, they would not be wrong. And what I don't want Emory to do now is to start implementing arbitrary rules to keep people who would otherwise have a right to be there off the campus simply because they don't like the protest. But again, if it's not a peaceful protest, it's not peaceful once you start vandalizing, and vandalism also can lead to some sort of violence, then they definitely would have a right to insert some sort of like quasi lockdown to where they could restrict only students on the campus due to these type of emergent situations.
Wow, that's very interesting. I so appreciate you chiming in on that and bringing your analysis. Obviously, that's a story we're going to continue to follow here on Atlanta News First and Atlanta News First Plus. I want to ask you about another story making major national headlines, and that is the rape conviction of Harvey Weinstein, the former media mogul, has now been overturned by an appeals court. Obviously, it's a big disappointment for the alleged victims. He's actually had more than 100 alleged victims accuse him of sexual assault, but his rape conviction in 2020 essentially centered on testimony from two different alleged victims. And I should say that the case centered on 2 women's accusations, but 6 women in total were called to testify. And the Court of Appeals has essentially said that that was inappropriate, that essentially, here's part of the ruling. We conclude that the trial court erroneously admitted testimony of uncharged alleged prior sexual acts, and that it was essentially prejudicial. And it kept Mr. Weinstein from getting a fair trial, and so now he's going to get a new trial. Do you think this was the right ruling?
Well, so legally it was sound, because typically you cannot allow prior bad acts to get in. There's a rule. It's a federal rule, 404B, which means you cannot allow prior bad acts in to show that someone has a propensity to do that. And essentially that's what the Court of Appeals found here, is that the testimony of the victims at that particular time, speaking on people who were not complainants in this particular case, were only meant to be prejudicial in that to show that he has a propensity to conduct these type of acts. And that is strictly that the 404B rule is a long-standing rule. I mean, I think anybody and everybody who's gone to law school understands that rule fundamentally, that you cannot allow prior bad acts in. Now, the other side is also arguing, on the flip side of that, you can present evidence to show modus operandi, or most people is MO. You can allow evidence for that. So it kind of skirts the line a little bit as to what will be allowed to get in. And apparently the Court of Appeals found that the testimony of these victims at that particular time was more prejudicial than probative, and that he was not therefore given a fair trial. And so now we're, the DA there says that they do plan to bring this case back to trial. It's unfortunate that the victims have to kind of go relive this again, but unfortunately these type of things, these legal safety valves are put in place for a reason, and hopefully there will still be enough evidence there to get another conviction. But the 404B information cannot get in if it's meant to show that he has a propensity to do these type of acts.
And people sometimes get angry because when they watch trials and so forth, and they say, well, how come that wasn't admitted? And they feel like, that was a piece of evidence that could have ended in a conviction. And this is why, essentially, because if the judge oversteps and it is deemed prejudicial upon appeal, then the whole thing gets thrown out.
Yeah, so herein lies the thing. I think a lot of people, and there are a lot of competent judges throughout this country. However, there are a lot of judges who, you have to understand, particularly if you've been a judge for a while, you're not necessarily attuned to practicing. And so some things kind of get lost. And judges are people. And just like I can read a book and you can read a book and we'll interpret it a different way, that is exactly what happens every day with the law. People's interpretation of the law differs, particularly based on jurisdiction. And this particular judge, using their sound discretion at that particular time, did not find that it was in violation of, the prior bad acts rule. And so here's where we are. Judicial discretion is a very wide and broad sweeping thing, and judges have the discretion to make decisions based on their own interpretations of the law. And that's exactly what occurred here. Yeah.
Anything else you want to point out about this overturning of this conviction, which obviously has a lot of people upset?
Yeah, a lot of people are upset. I guess the good thing is he will not necessarily be released. What will happen at this point is he does have a prior conviction in California, so he will be extradited back there to serve out his sentence there until this situation can be resolved. I mean, essentially, it's, that sentence, I believe, was for 12 years. He's 72 years old. And so this is a decision that the prosecution in New York has to make. Is it even worth going back through the trouble of relitigating this matter and having these witnesses have to go back through and be re-traumatized with this particular testimony again? And so I guess the decision has already been made that they do plan to re-prosecute. And so we'll see if there was enough information there and enough evidence there to secure a conviction without that testimony of his prior bad acts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much. So while we have you here, I want to ask you also about the Supreme Court arguments going on regarding immunity for the former president, Donald Trump. And it's something, that really would have bearing on certainly the federal case against him, because part of the argument is that, he was acting in his official capacity, and so he should have some kind of immunity to, to his alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election. what do you think of kind of the arguments that have been made, and what is the likelihood of success on really either side?
It's very hard to make that type of prediction, particularly given the Supreme Court right now is a very conservative court. You have some of the justices who were put there themselves by Donald Trump, so that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. What it really boils down to is whether or not the Supreme Court sees what he did as an official presidential act. My professional and personal opinion is that it is not. The arguments that were made, I think some of the arguments made by some of Trump's attorneys were comparing it to if he ordered, some sort of official act and some sort of diplomat was killed in the process, would he be charged criminally for that? That's a very different distinction from what he actually did. This is not an official presidential act. This was a criminal act. It was not presidential, so it was not in his official capacity. But again, it's going to be up to the Supreme Court to decide whether or not this was an official presidential act. And if it was an official presidential act, does he then therefore receive the blanket immunity that he would otherwise receive for any other particular presidential act?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you so much, Erica Wilson. So before I let you go, whenever you come on, of course, viewers get curious. They want to know what kind of cases do you take? What kind of cases are you interested in taking? How do they contact you?
So you can contact me through the Fairness Firm. We are a multifaceted firm. We do civil rights, we do human rights, we do personal injury, med-mal. Also, I still do family law, so that's still kind of encompassed in there. They can reach me at the info@fairnessfirm.com.
Thank you so much, Erica Wilson, attorney at law, joining us live here on Atlanta News First Plus. And again, let me show you our viewers the video from Emory University's campus one last time. And just a reminder, we are going to continue following the latest after at least 15 people were arrested at Emory University for protests on the Israel-Hamas war, and also related to the Atlanta Public Safety Training Center. So keep it right here on Atlanta News First.